Hey everyone, it's Rachel here from the Shades of Orange, and I was just in the mood to do a discussion video today. And what I want to talk about is the idea of reading standalone novels versus reading series. And it's just something I've been thinking a lot about lately, and I wanted to get everyone's opinion on it. Now first I want to say that these are my opinions. I by no means think they are right or the truth or anything like that. I realize that they're just my personal opinions towards this topic, so absolutely you can disagree 100% with what I'm about to say, and that is perfectly okay. I want to start a discussion. I don't mean to be argumentative, and I love reading both series and standalones. Hopefully on my channel you've seen that I have been reading both, but I just wanted to talk a little bit about my own preferences and then find out what your preferences are. And what I've noticed looking at my Goodreads shelf and what I've been reading the last while is that I definitely prefer reading standalones. I do think that's because of several different reasons. One being that I tend to read adult fiction, and I feel that adult fiction as opposed to YA tends to be more standalone books opposed to YA, which definitely has been trending towards trilogies and series lately. Certainly there's plenty of books in the adult section that are part of series, but I do tend to look towards the standalones. And really I read standalones whether or not I'm reading adult or YA. I look at the YA I read last year, and I read The Fault in Our Stars, I read Fangirl and Eleanor and Park. So I do find that the books I'm picking out, regardless of what age level it is, are the standalone books. One series that I started in the YA section last year was Unwound by Neil Shusterman, and of course is a very well-known novel that plays against the idea of pro-life or pro-choice, and I just thought it was such a fantastic book. It really made me question my own beliefs, even though I'm incredibly steadfast on my personal opinion, but it was that good of a book that it really made me question my own beliefs, and I just thought that Unwound was just a perfect book. I gave it 5 stars on Goodreads and absolutely loved it. However, I then went on to read the sequel to Unwound, which I believe is Unholy, and while I enjoyed that one, I felt that it weakened the story for me. I feel, and this is just me personally, I just felt that it kind of weakened a lot of the themes and it became more focused on the characters and the adventure and lost some of the cohesiveness of just that solid focused plot. And that's probably my one of the things that I tend to get nervous when reading a series, is that I love to have very focused themes and plots and have a very concise, purposeful book. And a lot of times I'll love the first book in a series, but the thing about having a series or multiple books is that I feel like it gives more room for the author to make mistakes or just do things that I don't like with the characters, with the plot. And that's always really hard for me, because sometimes I would rather just have one perfect book. Looking back at Unwound, I no longer love it as much as I originally did, just because after reading the second book, it made me look at the first book differently, and unfortunately I just didn't like it quite as much because of where the story started to go. I'll probably finish the series at some point, but I wish I had left it and treated Unwound as a standalone and hadn't continued with the series. And that is something I tend to do. Even when I read series, often enough I only read the first book in them. One book that comes to mind is The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo. Really great, fast-paced, gritty thriller. I enjoyed it, but I never had an interest to go back to those characters. And that kind of comes to my second point, and that is that I tend to not get attached to characters in books. Certainly I enjoy characters. I love well-developed characters that aren't just stereotypes. But I don't always need to see more of a character. I think that's just kind of a personal opinion that I don't get as attached to other characters. I've seen a lot of book reviews, people say, oh, this was my favorite character, I love this person so much. And I feel maybe I'm just a heartless person, but I just don't get attached to characters the same way. I often prefer when they just get killed off right away and there's no option of a second book. And that's just kind of my personal opinion on that. However, I definitely think that there are times that series are perhaps the only way to go. Particularly I think in the genre of fantasy, a lot of times you need just time, pages, in order to properly build a world. And so I do feel certain genres, yeah, particularly the fantasy is the one I'm thinking of most, although it could apply to science fiction. I do think that it can benefit from having that time to grow a world over time, because often in one book you don't get to see the full landscape of everything that's in the world, and so it is nice to see over time that development. And as well, series are good for times where the story is just simply too big to fit into one book. And one that obviously comes to mind for me is A Song of Ice and Fire series, which is complicated and intricate, and I can't imagine George R.R. Martin having to condense that one into a shorter single novel. It just would be impossible. So when it comes down to it, I think it's really personal preference. It depends a little bit. I think perhaps my guess is that if you really get attached to characters and have a love of world building, you'll probably enjoy series a lot more. If you're someone more like me, I tend to be a little bit more plot focused, which makes me sound like a very shallow reader. But there's something, not even just plot, but the idea of having a very focused theme, having a book be very thought out. I find endings of books particularly important, and often over series, because they always have to be continued, I find that the endings of books, particularly ones in the middle of a series, tend to be very weak, because they either have to be a cliffhanger or kind of just be left unfinished, and I really prefer just that like solid ending to a book. And not necessarily that it closes off everything, but just a very purposeful ending that this is where the author wanted to leave their story, and I don't get that as much in series. So definitely you can see my bias. I think it's 100% up to you what you enjoy, but I just kind of wanted to start a conversation and just ask, what do you guys prefer reading? I just know when I'm looking at Goodreads, if I start to see, you know, behind the book it will say brackets, you know, #1 of this and this series, I'm less likely to pick it up just because I know it's part of a series, and I realized that I was doing that. So those are my rambling thoughts about series versus standalones. Please let me know down below, which do you prefer and why? I just would love to start a conversation about it. I noticed my own habits, I'm definitely leaning towards standalone lately, but there are certainly benefits to reading series, and I'd love to know other people's thoughts on it. Hope you're having a good one. I'll talk to you later. Okay, bye.